Amazon founder Jeff Bezos once famously said, "There is no alternative to digital transformation." Except when I dress like this, I feel like I'm digitally untransformed. Visionary companies will carve out a new strategic option for themselves. Those that don't adapt will fail. It's a fact of life. It is a fact of life. I could not find words that would describe the best way of us studying this event, this gathering. Honored guests, online guests, leaders of the Telkom Business, colleagues and leaders of Business Day and related partners. Welcome to the very first Blaze with Telkom conference in partnership with Business Day. I'm your host, Mabote. A special welcome also to our online audiences. I try to stay away from being applauded. In a rapidly changing world, small businesses that fail to embrace digital transformation risk falling behind. And they will fall behind their competitors. It is a fact of life again, who are leveraging technologies or technological tools to reach greater heights in their businesses. Focused on the theme that we have today, digital industry experts will share insights, and I say experts and I mean it because I have met all of them, they are experts. I am officially the only person who knows nothing about digital transformation, which makes my job lighter than their job. I don't have to impress you guys about digital knowledge, right? But they will share with us how to bridge the digital divide, especially among SMEs. They will also show us opportunities and how you can create profitability and efficiencies in your market and in your business. This conference and all its sessions are tailored specifically for SMEs, people like me, because you don't think people who do this are SMEs. We are SMEs. We are the gig, right? And we are eager all the time to embrace the digital revolution and connect with other like-minded trailblazers. We have an exciting program planned with some fantastic speakers. So let's get started. To kick off the morning, I'm going to welcome somebody who I've known for a long time and I've been waiting to meet this person. And before I introduced them, they said to me, am I going to have to walk up stage when you call my name? And I said, no, you're going to have to run upstage like Obama did. Please welcome Lunga CEO of Telkom Consumer and Small Business to the stage.
Thank you, Rams. Appreciate.
You look more formal when you stand there.
Oh, okay. No, that's fine. I wrote some notes, right? Because I literally have 2-3 minutes. Welcome, everyone. And thank you for having me here. I tried avoiding running, right, so that I don't actually trip. And yeah, it's a Tuesday morning. So guys, thank you for coming through. I mean, there's just one, maybe a couple of few words that I really want to share with everyone. The first one really is around, just think about it. An average South African spends around 11 hours on the internet a day. Now, I don't know where people actually find time to sleep, spend time with kids, or maybe some of their hobbies, right? But they do spend a huge amount of time online. And that means actually, somehow we've got to find a way, right, of capturing their attention while they're online, right, without really forcing it upon them. And that's what SMEs actually have to figure out, going forward. I think we've been trying to do that for the past couple of years. Here's another fact. If I look at all large economies across the world, I mean, you can look at European large economies such as Germany, the US, think Japan, China, and some of the Asian tigers. Corporates or large enterprises didn't really drive those economies. It was largely driven by SMEs. And in some countries, SMEs contribute up to 60% of the GDP. So if we really have to get it right in this country, we've got to find ways of supporting SMEs to actually thrive. And one way of doing that is really around how do we actually get them into this economy that is becoming much more digital on a daily basis. So a very warm welcome to all of you guys in this insightful and timely panel discussion on really navigating the digital landscape in South Africa. I think for me, I'm really delighted to actually have this conversation today as we gather and explore some of the alternatives right in this space. I think in the digital age, what we really have to figure out is to, how to actually play in that space and also own our own space as well. I think the landscape is constantly evolving. There's technology for everything, if you really can think about it as well. And I think we really have to find those opportunities to use technology to find ways of innovating, growing, or also even delivering, services to our own customers differently. You get two types of, SMEs: those that actually buy the technology and use it as part of increasing or bettering their productivity, right, to deliver a service. And you also find SMEs that are in the digital space that are creating the technology and the tools to enable other SMEs, right? So it's in both ways. Everyone has to find a customer. And I always say to people that I deal with is, if you actually solve for a customer need and use technology to deliver on that need, you'll be successful. If you think by bringing technology, you're solving a customer need, you've got another thing coming. So let's have a good day today, and thank you very much.
My next guest is going to be pleased that today, for the very first time, I'm not going to mispronounce her name. She is Managing Executive of Consumer and Business Broadband Solutions at Telkom Business. Her name, never going to get it wrong. I'm so proud of myself, Mabote, that I know your name now, Mabote, right? I've said it so many times on the show. I've now memorized it. But most importantly, I've realized how much my future depends on your name, Mabote. Now, I have been given a very long bio to introduce you, right? Some of it says that you have been in the tech, you've been a tech girl for nearly 2 decades. Technology has always been your passion, and you've gained 20 years of experience in the IT field with a significant amount of time spent in the telco industry. What they did not say is that she's also a soccer mom. Mabote Mavas.
Good morning, everyone. Firstly, I probably just want to apologize for my voice. I had flu, and it left me with a sexy voice. My husband is probably the beneficiary, right? Actually, of that. So I really apologize if I'm projecting differently. But more than anything, I'm really excited to be here. I'm honored to come and talk to you about something that I'm really passionate about. And why am I passionate about it? Because I know that the outcome of this is really going to fuel the economy. And considering where we are, a few days ago, I was just reading an article that our economic conditions are probably going to be, as they are for the next, 3 to 4 years. So then this topic becomes quite important. But more than anything else, I'm even super, super excited about the fact that this topic really talks around how it can create opportunities for SMEs in our market. So very quickly, I think it's fair to talk about what are those key drivers for the SMEs to consider as we move forward. So from a telco perspective, one of the things that we always look at is, so what is going to be the future of data? We know that we're going to be in the era of data for a very long time. We're going to stay in this era for so long, right? And for many years, we are able to see through what I'm projecting here that the growth of data is going to be something that's quite significant. However, unfortunately for us as telcos, as much as this trajectory is going to go up, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're probably going to make a lot of revenue. So the pressures of data coming down will probably continue. The second point that we need to look at, I think Lunga already alluded to that, is that South Africa is the first country. If you look at this graph, we are the only country that spends the most time on the internet, right? We're followed by Brazil. And this stats actually talks about customers who are the average of 16 to about 65. It doesn't include the 3-year-olds, right? We know that the 3-year-olds at home, they spend a lot of time as well in data, between 3 years and around 15 years. So that's the second one. Thirdly, We've got some of the research houses, they've been doing some data analysis, and one of the things they found in Africa is that South Africa is one of those that are getting very quality download speed experience, as well as consistent quality of data connectivity. Now, what that amplifies is the fact that it really talks about the fact that the customers, they are trusting that connectivity is there, right? And once you trust that connectivity is there, you know you're going to be spending a lot of time in gaming, all sorts of things like that. You don't have to worry about whether that connectivity is stable or whether it's going to go down. Forget the load shedding. Okay, this was probably before the load shedding, but that, right? So that's really what it amplifies. What else does it amplify? It also amplifies the fact that in South Africa, I think the latest test that I saw was around about 2020, we have about a smartphone penetration of about 23 million, right? At that time, they were projecting that in 2023, we're probably going to sit at 5 million more, right? So this number, is also going down. It's also going up. But what are we doing when we're spending so much time on the internet? What are we doing? And one of the things that came through is that we spend a lot of time researching on how to do things. So we no longer call friends and moms and pops and say, hey, how do I do this thing? Every time you don't know what to do, you go on the internet, you start researching. What else are we doing? 72% we're finding new ideas and inspiration. 68% is education and studying. About 36% is business network as well as social network. So that's what we use the time, on the internet. However, also one of the things that SMEs needs to think about is the e-commerce, right? Some of the interesting stats that I've seen is that we are the 42nd largest e-commerce market. That's very high. That's very high, considering globally how many countries are out there. Secondly, we know that in 2025, we are expecting a surge of about 150% of e-commerce. Fourthly, if you look at 23, there was, I think World Wide Works was telling us that we're probably going to see about a growth of about 25% in 2023 just on e-commerce. And then we also see that there's going to be a card penetration of about 8%, when it comes to the card purchases. These numbers are overwhelming. I'm not talking single-digit numbers. I'm talking double-digit numbers. So meaning that if you are an SMME, or even if you are a consumer and you haven't even gotten yourself to actually be active on e-commerce, the train is moving, right? If you're an SMME and you haven't figured out how you're going to be part of this, this whole system, the train is even moving faster, all right? So that's really what that's telling us. However, what is quite surprising is we see that there's a low number of South African businesses that make use of digital tools. You'll see that there's only 32% of SMEs that are ready for innovation. And then there's about 35% of SMEs are prepared for some sort of disruption. I'm liking these two because what that says is that the SMEs are aware. They are aware that there is some transformation that's taking place. They know about it. They know that they need to think about it. They know that as they are thinking about their business going forward, they cannot not think about how the digital transformation is really going to have an impact, in their businesses. And around only 27% use cloud services and 19%, use them quite intermittently. I was quite surprised to know that SMMEs, only about 20% of those in South Africa are actually using e-commerce. That for me was quite surprising. And why it was surprising is because from a user perspective, we use e-commerce. But I'm not seeing that translating into that from an SMME perspective. And I think for me, it's really daunting because as individuals, we know what to do, we know that using it, it will give you those services faster and better, but that translation is not coming through into businesses, and that has to change. And some of the stats here, you can see that in the top two graphs, those SMMEs are saying, yeah, well, I used it. Yes, I'm going to use it probably in the next 6 months. I'm so concerned about the bottom two because the bottom two are saying, I don't plan to use it in the next 12 months. And the other one is like, I don't really know that I'm actually going to use it. And for me, the bottom two is a big concern for me because those are businesses that are actually going to be invalid, actually, in the future. And we can't afford to have SMME businesses that are invalid in this economy. So digital transformation for SMMEs is very key. But why is it key? That's because it really gives the SME an opportunity to lower their cost. We just cannot afford to have the brick and mortar. It's too expensive. It's too expensive. It's on the margins. That we offer out there. It provides improved efficiencies, increased reach. My favorite one is the fact that you can acquire customers. You just can acquire that customer just sitting in your corner. That's really what it can do for you. It enables innovation, and more than anything else, it gives you the opportunity to access, some resources. But this one is my favorite one. This one is my favorite one. What digital transformation really gives SMMEs is the fact that they lower their barrier to entry. What does that talk about? Is the fact that SMMEs can enter into industries, right, and reset people that have been in those industries for years. That's really what the opportunity is here. And of course, it gives you the opportunity to attract the talent, gain some of productivity as well as efficiency. But let's talk about real life examples, right? And some of them, I'll probably skip some of the trailer as I'm going through that. If I look at the fintech, now, fintech, as we all know, banks were the ones that were actually owning it, right? Arrogant in their own way. They've been in businesses for the last 200 years. Why can't they be arrogant? They know they've been doing this for years, right? High transaction fees for the SMMEs and everyone else. It really took a long time for them to service us. I mean, we've been to those banks, some of us who are, if you were born 79 like me, you've been on the queue for a very long time. And those 95, post-95, you probably don't even remember that there is such, right? So banks, they are big and their systems are complex, those type of things. Services, to really get at services was quite hard. But then what happened with the digital transformation is we then had players like the Ikoka, like the Yokas, who came into the market. And what I like about these companies, they come into the market, they look at the weakness. They look at the weakness of those that have been in the business for a long time. And then what they do is they adopt technology and they reset it, right? Not only do they reset it, they also make sure that they give you transaction fees that are much lower than the other side. Why is it lower? They've got nothing to lose. If on the other side, on the banks, the transaction fee were 10 rand, on this side, they said the transaction fees are 5 rand. It's the money that they never had. It's the money that they never had. Another example in the short-term industry. So obviously, the insurance industry is big. Once again, it's full of people who've been players for years as well, right? They've recorded about 158 billion of gross premiums. What are we seeing? The likes of Pineapple, the likes of Naked Insurance, they're saying, don't even call us. We don't even have shops. We don't even have offices. www. That's how you're going to do business with us. They have been making money. They have been making money without even having to open a shop, right? They use digital transformation to set themselves up. Here's another example, telco, that's our industry. The likes of ourselves, Vodacom, Telkom, MTN, we are big giants in this industry. We were reset by smaller ISPs. They led with digital first, right? You'll never find AfriHost telling you, I've got a shop wherever, nowhere. You're not going to find it. So they led with the digital first. MWeb, similarly, they did the same thing. Today, as I talk to you, they are quite big in terms of their fiber market share, and they are big players in the market. And I know they're very much enabled by the regulatory. In this space, for example, we are probably the only one back then who were selling the DSL services. They came in, as I speak to you today, we have more than 200 ISP players in the market. They come in, how do they do it? They came in, they looked at the market, they looked at specific areas, and they honed onto those areas. They learned them. They ensured that the service is it's an epic service, There wasn't a lot of complexity there. So the beauty about them is when they come in, they leapfrog right to the top. They don't have to come in and define themselves and start creating all these complex processes and systems that we actually have. And there's a lot of examples I can tell you about, guys. I mean, we know about the Uber, right? Again, it's an example. They came in, they looked at the taxi market, they looked at the inconvenience, they looked at the security issues that are in that market, came in, reset. That's all they had to do. Today, as I talk to you, they're a $31 billion company. They employ about 5 million drivers across the globe, right? Fashion, Super Ballast, I think, yeah, Super Ballast. Super Ballast, about 1.7 billion, right? I don't even know who works for Super Ballast. I don't even have a cousin that works there. But I know they make money. Those people, they make a lot of money, you know? Go back to the hospitality, booking.com, right? Airbnb. Those type of people, what did they do? And actually, what I find fun is the fact that those who've been in the market, they end up being part of the system, right? Because if they don't become part of the system, unfortunately, they're not going to have a business tomorrow, right? So, and what do we mean by, digital transformation is not a once-off occurrence. And it's quite important that when SMEs think about it, and especially if you're an existing SMEs, we've got ways of how to think about it. You can start by digitizing, really thinking about how do we make sure that you convert some of your, your business to be a lot more, digital type of a thing. And there in your area, if you've got processes that are, the way you collect your data, it's the first thing that you need to do. Secondly, you need to leverage on digital products. That's what you need to think about. And then digital transformation right at the end, that talks about the model itself. Now, that's the highest level that SMEs need to think about. I always say that if you're a small, medium business and you are entering into this market, here again, you have an opportunity to start right at the top, right? You leapfrog right at the top. There's no need for you to start and actually start the business, in a very manual way. What are the benefits? If you look at digitization, cost efficiencies, very important for the SMEs. That for you, it's quite important that you stay as lean as possible. Very important, because in economic conditions where we are today, you just cannot afford to have overheads. You just can't afford to have overheads. If you are looking at digitalization, you've got process automation, you've got enhanced market reach that you need to think about, you've got new product services that you can think about wearing this digitalization. And then from a digital transformation perspective, like I said, there are ways in terms of how you can actually think about how you actually acquire your customers. And that's important because you just cannot afford, to be invalid, tomorrow. Opportunities for SMEs using digital transformation. Look at these numbers. 22 million in Facebook, 11 million in TikTok, 5.6 million. I mean, TikTok, our kids are always in TikTok. My daughter dances, I don't understand. But anyway, YouTube, 25 million. Instagram, 5.65 million. What has been very interesting about these companies is what they did is when they entered the market, they made sure that they got a lot of customers. These are these numbers. And then when they were done with that and realized that these numbers are quite significant, they then started developing marketplaces on top of that. Now that they have the demand, right, they started creating, the supply as well. So that's really how they were, every time, because I think we don't usually, link the two, and it wasn't accidental. When they think about when they bring such, it's because they know at the end of the day, they know how they're actually going to monetize that, with the businesses. So for businesses in South Africa, you cannot not afford to think about how you can be part of a marketplace. You just cannot afford it. Why? Because it gives you access to that reach that we're talking about. In our world, we've got a year platform as well, which then allows you to be part of that marketplace. In others, for example, VodaPay is one, Takealot is another one, Amazon.com is going to be here, AliExpress. You just cannot afford not to be part of this marketplace. And if you can, that's okay, but the reality is, you're going to be left behind. Now, every time when we have conversation about SME, we know that SMEs struggle with access to funding, they struggle with access to market, they struggle with access to skills. But even in the digital world, it's going to be quite interesting because when you look at the fintech, the work that's been done on the fintech is that we are starting to see marketplace lenders whereby they connect the lender and the borrower together. And what's interesting about these marketplaces is they don't want to know where you stay, your addresses and what's happening in your bank, you know, the stuff that the banks always ask us. They use artificial intelligence to learn more about your business. They look at the market that you serve. They look at some behaviors, data points that they get. Out of that, then they're actually able to give you some funding. And those things happen in a week or so, or even in a few days, you know, in other areas. Access to markets, we spoke about e-commerce, we spoke about, you know, marketplaces. And when it comes to access to skill, of course, with the online digital platforms that we have, you know, across the globe, you guys have abundance of platforms that you can use to be able to access some of these skills. So from a partnership perspective with Telkom, we know that this is a very daunting journey for a lot of the SMEs. Theory makes sense. You kind of understand what it means. You kind of understand what it can do for you, but you don't really know who you need to travel the path with, you know? And from a Telkom business perspective, we are here to come and tell you this is our bread and butter. This is what we do, you know? What makes us successful is to see you successful. That's how we define success, you know, from our end. So with that in mind, I really want to thank you for this opportunity. And before I end, I just want to play this video, but thank you very much for listening to me.
Doing big things, to go from a spaza shop to a wholesaler. Make it from a local pickup to a national carrier. Growing from Sis Jules Wamakeke to Juliet Bakeries and Goods franchise. At Telkom Business, we share that vision. We enable every business to go big, work big, and do big. We have deals and products to suit any business and make it easier to do business big. Do business big with Telkom Business.
Good morning. So good to be with you all. As Ram says, I'm Alicia Seckham, and I'm going to be moderating a conversation over the next 45 minutes. We're going to be taking a look at now bridging the digital divide, because like Makosi said, it can be very daunting, right? Empowering growth and innovation pertaining specifically to SMEs in this new digital era. We hear it over and over again. The message hasn't been lost on us. Bridging the digital divide empowers SMEs to harness the benefits of technology, of digital transformation. This way, of course, technology has changed the way business is being done. But access to affordable digital tools and infrastructure is still what acts as a major constraint to many SMEs that are out there doing business. And when it isn't that, well then quite frankly, it's access to skills, to education that will empower SMEs to navigate digital platforms and tools that have been provided effectively enough, that will afford them the ability to leverage all that it comes with, the benefits that have been highlighted so far this morning, cost efficiencies, growth. Today, we're going to try and get to grips with all of that, what needs to be done to start closing the gap and explore some of the options that are in fact available to SMEs out there to better leverage the benefits that come with this digital era. What are some of the cost-effective solutions to adopting these digital innovations without straining budgets and practically speaking? And that's where the emphasis needs to lie, right? Practical solutions. How does one go about establishing a network of resources at the end of the day to aid SMEs down this digital journey that they choose to pursue? Joining me for the conversation over the next 45 minutes, and as I introduce each of you, can I ask you please to join me on stage? You've already gotten pretty familiar with Lunga. So Lunga, if I can ask you to make your way up. Lunga is CEO of Telkom Consumer and Small Business. Mashaka Moseana, who's Director of the Centre of Entrepreneurship at Johannesburg Business School. Karen Light, who's expert solution architect within business and digital advisory at BCX. And Tabiso Monkane, who's client relations officer at 4IRI. There we go. Welcome to you all. Thanks so much for being with us this morning. And before we get into the conversation, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to just reiterate what Rams highlighted. This is a conversation that is going to call on your participation. So in the final 15 minutes that we have on stage, we're going to be opening things up to the audience, whether you're joining us in the room, in person, or online as well. So please, there will be a roving microphone doing its rounds. If you've got any questions for any of our panelists this morning, feel free to direct them this way. Online, type them into the chat box. I will then pose them on your behalf. Let's get straight into it. For now, Lunga, I'm going to start off with you because it all sits amongst the Sustainable Development Goals, right? Recommendations for the G20 to, foster this inclusive and sustainable digital ecosystem. How much of a closing of the divide are we actually looking at?
It's actually quite high, all right? Well, it also depends on where you are. So, I mean, if I look at just South Africa as a country, you've got what we call rural areas, in essence, and then you get urban areas or semi-urban, in essence, depending on how you look at it. If I go back to how South Africa has done it before, and we can locate Telkom, right, in essence, as an infrastructure company under the Department of Postal Services, I think so, back in the day. That's over 200 years. So they actually laid out the foundation with the telephone, right, into almost every part of the country. And over the years, and then that sort of evolved into different technologies to allow people to get into the internet and some other services. Early 90s, I think the country sort of went through a transition, and the government then decided, you know what, let's spin this off as a separate entity. And then later, they started looking at public-private partnerships, which made Telkom a private entity in essence. Now, with private entities, they have one ambition, which is to make profits, right, for their own shareholders and also stakeholders in essence. It changes the game in terms of where you can actually invest in infrastructure. Now, if I look at it today, the gap is huge, right, in terms of the provision of those services and at what price point. So you've got a lot of large privately funded enterprises doing this, and obviously their goal is to profit maximization for their own shareholders. And those shareholders, actually, most of us that are sitting here, they've got a job because it's your pension funds, right? Now, to close that gap, because if you've got a commercial outcome versus a social outcome, there's bound to be conflict. That's where government has to come in and say, you know what, the gap is huge. You guys can't get into these areas. We will co-invest with you to actually close the gap, right, into the rural areas. As we also see migration from rural to urban, let's actually make sure that we can catch those customers, or let's catch the people, right, that are coming from rural areas into the urban by co-partnering with the private sector to build the backbone.
We'll get to building off those relationships in a little bit later in the conversation. Karen, what do we blame for this wide gap that still persists? I mean, do we blame something like COVID-19, for example? We all knew that digital transformation was coming, but its forward momentum has certainly been accelerated, right? Shortening the timelines for everyone to get up to speed. So we may talk about the fact that we've got this ability to leapfrog, but we've got to act fast.
Yeah, so I think the gap, sometimes SMEs don't think that they need digital. Because if you are selling pizzas, you're saying, but I need to get pizza to my customers. But it's also about the administration to look at how you can become more efficient. So it's that kind of, that thinking of that they actually need digital, not only for the service or product that they're delivering, but to make it more efficient. And then potentially the perceived costs, to say, but it's going to cost a lot. But now we're seeing a lot of platforms coming in, software as a service. You no longer need to go into that whole buying your own infrastructure.
Yeah. As you can see, we've got hints of the solutions coming to the surface already, and we'll be flipping the script on this conversation in just a bit, Mashaka, getting to those solutions for SMEs. But I want to lay the ground here and get real. To what extent is technology really changing the face of small business?
I'll just have to say to a very large extent. Look, I've been in the space of supporting small businesses for quite some time. And what we have always known is that there is a challenge with how we train and support small medium enterprises. And that became glaringly evident during COVID-19, when businesses, when COVID-19 forced a lot of businesses, corporations and small businesses, to automate because of remote working, either automate or digitize their own businesses. And our very own small medium enterprise in South Africa, they failed to do that. They even failed to pivot towards the challenges that were coming to them in that time. So we had to take a look at ourselves as professors of practice and even the incubation space and accelerators in saying that all that we have done over time with the ESD funds that have been invested in this, how is it that all the interventions that we have done, they didn't prepare our own small medium enterprises to face this volatile and ambiguous environment that they find themselves in? Such that most of the businesses, because they couldn't pivot and because they couldn't adopt digital technologies at the time, they shriveled and faded. They couldn't survive. So what we have seen is that with the universities, first we really need to decolonize the way that we impart knowledge. Because our own SMEs, we put them in a training environment where we do not give them the opportunity to translate the knowledge practically in their own contextual environments. And with SMEs, there's a high risk because whatever you learn, you need to apply in your business immediately. And if you fail, the consequences are dire, the consequences are higher. So there really is a need for us, and we have adopted it. We've launched the Artificial Intelligence Institute at the Johannesburg Business School under the University of Johannesburg. We've done several tests on how we support small and medium enterprises. And I think that we do have a proof of concept on how to remove the digital transformation for small, medium enterprises from their cost center into their profit center.
Yeah, and that is the thing, the incentive at the end of the day,
Absolutely.
the benefits that come with digital. It's how it affects the bottom line, right?
Absolutely.
I came across a very interesting quote as I was preparing for this conversation. SMMEs are intrinsically cautious and slow adopters of technology, especially where SMEs are typically under-resourced and so cannot afford expensive missteps.
Absolutely.
As tradition would have it, sticking to the tried and tested ways of doing things makes good sense. It's not profitable, but it makes good sense. So how do we start challenging that, Thabiso? With your experience in both entrepreneurship and technology as well, give us a success story or an example of where bridging the digital divide significantly empowered an SME to transform their business and thrive.
I mean, is my mic on?
Yep.
I think it's a case of, cascading benefits, moving from one SMME success into the other. And I mean, Makoto actually mentioned Yoko, for instance, and Ikoka, and what they've managed to do in this space in terms of really being able to enable digital payments within the SME space has been astronomical. Even just how they've actually been able to capture those stories has been such an inspiring thing to actually see. But I think that we also need to kind of really come to a point of sincerity here and really speak a bit to the contrarian truth here. The contrarian truth here is that the only way that SMMEs can essentially access innovation and digital transformation is if we actually lower the gauntlet for IP in this country. And that's the honest truth. If you've got open source, you can actually then put technological advancements in the hands of these SMMEs at almost a zero of the actual cost multiple. And that's what we should actually start to look at. I think that South Africa needs to really just start to position itself at the point of, really driving the rate of innovation within the country. I mean, if we sit and we had to talk about it at length, what is the cornerstone of our most innovative era in this country? I mean, if I had to just pass that out into the room right now, it's a bit of a cricket's moment to say that, But if you do move into the Silicon Valley space, you know that the semiconductor space, and that was the actual catalyst for Silicon Valley. We've seen how CryptoPunks, for instance, which is a complete rebellion, a constructive one and a very organized one, brought about, the era of blockchain and how that's actually transformed the world. So I think we need to look at it a bit differently. I think we need to be a bit more brave, and I think we need to be a bit more rebellious in terms of how we actually approach the future.
Very quickly, Lunga, just as an outline at the top, what are the key components of a comprehensive, multifaceted approach to bridging the digital divide for small businesses, given the realities we've just outlined?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. So SMEs, they exist for a reason, right? To sell their products and services to consumers, right? So you first have to bridge the gap between consumers that are digital savvy or have access to some sort of a digital platform, right? And also connect them with SMEs. In a way, you almost have to go deeper and say who's going to lay out the infrastructure at what cost, and what's going to be the cost of data, right? Everyone always says data is expensive in South Africa as compared to Nairobi, right? Move beyond Nairobi, right, into the next town. Are you going to get the same price? No. It's cheaper in London. Go beyond London or New York. You're going to see prices starting to change. And they usually do that in relation to the infrastructure that's been laid out and the amount of people that can consume it. So if you really want to have an impact, you got to have government coming together with private sector to say, let's lay out the foundation of all of this, because all of these other nice things we're talking about won't exist if there's no infrastructure. I'll give you another typical example. So we've got a huge shortage of what I call developers, right? Either Java or I don't know what's the latest. These days, every time I talk to the IT guys, there's a shortage. So therefore, let's go offshore. And I had an interesting conversation. So I was in a Teams call, and the guys were giving an update. And this guy is literally sitting in India giving us an update about the platform that he's building for us. And then he quickly says, guys, can you give me 10 minutes, right? And then he disappears for 10 minutes, and then he comes back. And we're like, okay, what are you doing? Like, no, I was rebooting my generator, right? I'm like, where are you working from? He's like, listen, dude, I'm in the rural area, right?
Yeah.
I was like, how's connectivity? It's actually great. I don't have to move to Mumbai, right? I can actually do stuff from here. Now, imagine if you had someone in Umtata or deep into the Polokwane, I don't know, Limpopo or KZN, right? Offering the same service as an SME, one person, which is development, right, of any solutions, and they can work from where they are, because they've got access to the internet, either via mobile tower or the old telephone or any broadband service, including satellite in essence. That won't happen if private enterprises are the only ones who have to do it. There's got to be a social compact with government to do that.
Absolutely. You've got to, to get this equation right, you've got to get both the public and private sector playing here. Just let's touch on that infrastructure rollout a little bit. What's the status update as far as infrastructure rollout is being concerned, especially, Lunga, where you're, looking at competing priorities like sheer access to power?
Yeah, I mean, there's that, right? There's also the actual, so how much it used to cost to lay out fiber 10 years ago, today it's almost 90% less, right? However, if you're laying out a kilometer of fiber, you've got to figure out who's going to consume it and at what price point and how long will it take for you to recover your money. So if I look at urban areas in South Africa, fiber is almost everywhere where you can find it, or where there's people, right, where it can be commercializable. So in essence, when I look at high dense, high commercializable type of areas, you're almost close to 100%. High dense, difficult to commercialize, the penetration is almost at 20%. So let's take townships or even informal settlements, right? But fiber is not the only technology. If I then take the same slice and look at what I call mobility, which is fixed wireless, what we know as LTE or data, through a router, close to 100%. Everyone has that, these days. If I look at cell phones, everyone has that. So in essence, infrastructure is via those technologies. But if I look at satellite technology, it's there, it can be utilized, however, too expensive. We've seen with MultiChoice changing their decoders, right, where they used to keep the content on the decoder to where they're actually now diverting it. So they actually require you to have some sort of internet access to watch catch-up, right? So everyone is playing with all of these things. So from where we are, high urban, high dense, high commercializable, it's there. Outside of that, it's almost non-existent. I've got a couple of farmers as my customers that are really, really struggling because I'm ripping off the old copper lines that I can't keep going because they get stolen all the time, right? So now I have to give them fiber, now I can't because it's too expensive. Satellite, the prices haven't come down because there are a lot of people there, right, on the technology. So hence I'm saying, pull in the public sector to say, how can we do this together to enable much more infrastructure being laid out into almost every corner. Our license condition on the mobility side, they require us to do that. However, that clause has been changed so much to, yes, we'll get coverage to 100%, but where there's people. And how to define people, it's got to be a number of X with this commercializable value.
There's a whole lot of parameters that we've got to take into consideration here. It's also a very forceful pull on government to get involved here, Thabiso. In the interim, are there cost-effective solutions and strategies that SMEs can, implement to work around some of the challenges that they currently face? And you mentioned lowering the gauntlet. Perhaps let's throw the gauntlet down on business. How can tech companies better tailor their tools, their platforms to meet specific needs that cater to the demands of SMEs right now?
I think that that's it's a good question, but it's also kind of open-ended as well, because the essence of a tech company is to solve latent human problems, right? And that's what you are essentially trying to do. It's just that there's a methodology to what you do that's kind of different from what any other business would actually kind of employ. I think that, again, I'm a firm believer in the internet. I think I'm the youngest panelist here, being born in the 90s. I'm a firm believer in the internet, and I truly believe that open source technology, open source software, open source anything is going to be the future, because we're living in the age of ubiquitous information sharing. Information is free. It's everywhere. Now, the key trick here is for entrepreneurs to learn how to actually then catalyze information and turn it into value. And I think that's where the true innovation is actually going to come in the next coming generations. It's a mindset shift. It's a way we actually think. Dr. Machaka was actually speaking about the failure of entrepreneurs or SMEs to actually evolve during the COVID-19 phase and really pivot. But nobody really teaches you the methodology behind pivoting.
Yeah.
It's a method. It's not something that you just wake up and imagine that, hey, now I'm going to pivot because times are hard. It's a methodology that you need to kind of really get institutionalize. And once you've institutionalized that methodology, you put entrepreneurs and SMEs in a better position. But in terms of just, really catalyzing that, I think that the internet is the greatest answer. We've seen it with YouTube, how that's created an entire creator economy. I mean, we've seen it with TikTok even, and how that's actually decentralized, content creation as well. So these are the new ways of actually doing things, where you access something for free, a tool for free, and it's about how you catalyze that into value that actually then monetizes it.
Yeah.
So that's where my headspace is at, and that's what I see for the future.
And it's so important, what Tabiso is highlighting here, that it's going to require a shift in mindset. The way we think about things, the way we approach things, like it or not, all of this is going to come with some kind of price tag, right, Mashaka? So looking at SMEs overcoming, let's say, budget constraints, let's take the conversation into that arena, associated with adopting some of these digital innovations now. Are there innovative financing options available for technology investments? And do we need to start thinking differently about things, or is it what it is?
Innovative financing options. There's an advocacy role that we play at the Center for Entrepreneurship for Small Medium Enterprises. And seeing that we've always been able to mobilize funds in supporting small businesses through the Enterprise and Supply Development Fund, which I have to say, it grows exponentially, and yet the results on the other end with small medium enterprises is a paradox. So what we have now started the advocacy on is on repurposing even how we look at enterprise and supply development, or even the thinking around BBBEE in saying that it's an impact investing fund. And that what you would normally see with corporations investing in small medium enterprise in that element, or with that instrument, is on pure training, because really they're not training them to be competent to absorb them into their supply chain, because they're quite happy with their own supply chain. They don't want to transform that supply chain, but they're very happy to tick off a check box. And that does a disservice for small medium enterprises. But what we're saying is that with the same spend, now bring it over to the university, because you can leverage from the strength of the professors and the students that are highly entrepreneurial. So we've tested this already. So what we have done is we've engaged with several corporations and multinationals to give off their ESD fund, 3% of net profit after tax. And what we have done with that, we have supported small medium enterprises to digitally transform. We need to accept the challenges that we need to recognize the challenges that are facing small medium enterprises. And most of them, we have about 2.6 to 2.9 million small medium enterprises in South Africa, and about 30% of that is the one that's contributing to the GDP of South Africa. And they really do not have many employees in their companies, and with the requisite skill that would support them to be, to function well in this digital age. So what we're saying is that South Africa has always had the skills gap, and now it has widened up. even further because of the 4-hour skills that they need to possess. Now, we have graduates, but we're not training them. And I need to look around the room if my employers are not in here because I might just get fired. I have to admit, we really are not training them to be fit for the world of the future. You know, where they don't have the requisite skill. But now we started decolonizing education in itself because we want our own graduates to give a return on investment on small, medium enterprises and corporation as well. You might know, and I'm going to come to the point, you might know of this concept of Engine 1 and Engine 2 of innovation, right? Introduced
Spell
by,
it out for us.
Okay, Engine 1 and Engine 2 introduced by Bain and Company. And the concept around there comes from Silicon Valley and what happens there in Boston or with MIT and Harvard, in the communities that they exist in that we leave Engine 1 for what you know and do very well. You've captured the market, that's where your bread and butter comes from, for all corporations, for all companies. However, you also need a second engine in case the first engine falls away. But in the second engine, it allows you to fail, to innovate, to bring in products that you would test in the market. And should they have a solid proof of concept, you throw them into the engine 1 to generate revenue. Yeah. Corporations are doing this. Discovery is doing this, and that's why it's leading in the market. However, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And what we're saying, we're positioning the universities with the strength of professors and the students to be an engine 2 of innovation for small, medium enterprises.
Yeah.
And what we have done so far with the Innovation Lab at the Johannesburg Business School is that we have now given the proficiency of coding and problem solving to these undergrad students from all faculties. They don't even have to come from, the Faculty of Computing and Engineering. You know? And we've given them the coding skills and specializing in gaming, VR and XR, web development, and mobile development. And what we have seen now so far with the SMEs that we have supported is that they would come over and we have AI tools off the shelves that we can support them with. Yeah. The thing is, we do not have shortage, as Mabote has said earlier on, that people spend a lot of time now on the internet. Look, it's not information that we lack, but it's the adoption and translating knowledge or theory into practice for small, medium enterprises. So we're closing that gap of translating whatever they have seen, either on the internet, on LinkedIn, on the YouTube, so that they can apply it practically, immediately in their own businesses, and also reducing the risk of adoption in their businesses so they don't make mistakes. But then that's the one thing, adopting those tools. Yeah. But then we have a second leg where we function as an agile innovation engine, where you can come in and innovate for your own business.
Yeah. Karen, a lot's been said there. I mean, that's very meaty and it leaves us with a lot to digest. But, at the end of the day, SMEs cannot walk this path blindly. The risk would be ending up nowhere slowly at extreme expense, right? They need to be intentional about their digitalization strategy. They need to align their culture. That's the one thing. They need to align their structure and processes to strategy at the end of the day. So if we consider SMEs charting a digital transformation map, I mean, what does something like that look like? What's the step 1, 2, 3?
So I think the word intentional is really what it's about. So you need to set that vision. They need to set a vision for themselves as to how digital do they want to become. And then they need to also think about things in phases, because digital transformation is not just a single step, it's a journey. So you need to think of those phases that you need to go through, and you need to then think intentionally about your stakeholders or your customers. And not only your customers, the staff that you are working with and your community. So what do you need for those different parties? And then look at the technologies that can solve the problems for those parties. So it's that vision, it's a stepped plan with the technologies on, and then looking at so that it solves for your stakeholders, and then the training that goes with that. And that then helps to chart a way, and that when you're doing something, it has context. I'm not choosing blockchain because everybody's talking about blockchain. It is actually going to help me in my business.
So building a network of resources is crucial for SMEs, right? Embarking on this digital journey. What advice do you have for SMEs on how they can establish and leverage such networks effectively? Are there any specific partnerships or collaborations that have been particularly successful in this regard?
I think I would like to answer that with something very cynical to say that, sorrow loves company, right? So when you are going through your pitch of pain as an entrepreneur, the best thing to do is to actually get involved in communities of other entrepreneurs that are in a similar space as you. I mean, we've done that ourselves. I'm a part of multiple entrepreneurial communities, continental, international, local one. One of my favorite ones that I'm very involved with is Dakis in Tech, for instance. I'm looking around the room and I can see so many of my community members here. And that's the power of community, the fact that you go to a place where you can actually then not only share information on things that are happening in the ecosystem, but you also have the opportunity to also kind of learn and really ask hard questions, which your peers can kind of really come to your aid and really be able to answer. So I think that is a very important thing. Leverage communities to leverage resources. And if you can do that, if you can literally leverage those communities, build those communities yourself, you are in a much better position to kind of navigate and maneuver around the entrepreneurial ecosystem here in South Africa. I mean, I've done it before. As an experiment, I started a Facebook group, for instance, for SMEs in a specific location. It took me about 30 days to get 5,000 members on that group. And it was just being quite clear and succinct about what the purpose of the group is.
Yeah.
And even to Lunga's point, mentioning that, the lady who's selling the Nguni carpet might not know who her ideal customer is. And communities can help you refine that particular idea of who your ideal customer is if you can really put it through that entire loop. So it's an entire loop that you put it through, and that community will kind of give you the feedback that you need. So my long and short of it, if you're feeling sorrowful and going through something on your own as an entrepreneur, find someone to share that sorrowful experience with.
And it really does speak to one of the first questions that came through on the chat room this morning, because it emphasizes this need to build a sustainable ecosystem, a support ecosystem that takes you through this journey. When you have a question like this, why is it so difficult to reach responsible people in big companies, right? Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to open to questions from the audience at this point. So if you can indicate by show of hand, if you've got a question for anyone, the roving microphone will find its way to you for you to pose directly. Is there a roving microphone? There we go. Their hands going up in front. Okay, while it makes its way there, let's tackle this one, Lunga. I'm Lorenzo from Advadno Tech Integrated Tech Solutions. My question stems from a funding point of view. Empowering SMEs is the future, but we often don't get funding from corporates, especially newly established Black-owned companies vying for businesses in areas where well-established companies play and dominate. Further to my question, what is Telkom's take on SME finance for digital upcoming businesses in South Africa?
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak specifically about ours, right? We've got a couple of programs. So we've got something called Future Makers. Now, the way you actually want to access these programs, you must almost match what you want to offer, right, to a corporate, because corporates are getting narrow in terms of their scope. They're only looking for certain types of entrepreneurs that they can scale, because going through an ESD program, and then at the end of it, you actually don't have customers to sell to, right? It becomes an issue. That's why they fail. So the way we've thought about it was to say, okay, let's find entrepreneurs in a particular space that we can support in solving our own customer problems. So if you're a technician that actually lays at fiber, let's bring you in. We'll put you through a Future Makers program where we support you with funding, but you have a customer at the end of it, which is Telkom as a start, right? And beyond that, we start connecting you with all the other enterprises that are looking for work from suppliers, SMEs such as you.
Yeah.
We used to have an asset manager managing our funds up to the tune of 500 million, funding tech startups. We've actually, helped, seed fund some of the well-known ones, such as, I think, Yoko at some point, and also Sweep South. I think you've seen a couple of those outside as well that we're showcasing. And those ones, we're actually helping them to actually scale, right? And they can sell to market, not particularly to us. But corporates are becoming much more narrower. on their scope. So you've got to look for corporates that are playing in your space and apply through those. Everyone has an enterprise, supplier development fund, but I'd actually employ you to look beyond those ones, because within each corporate, they might have a different channel for you that is particularly tailor-made for you to succeed, rather than to become a supplier, right, of Telkom, but become much more a business partner.
Absolutely.